Imagine stepping back in time to late 18th century Australia. The British have just arrived, setting up a colony at a place the local Eora people call Warren, which the newcomers rename Sydney Cove. Among the clans of the Eora nation is one man whose name would echo through history. As we don't know his exact birth year, we know he was a Bidjigal man, a skilled warrior, and a charismatic leader. His story isn't just about one man. It's the story of one of the first major organized resistances against colonial expansion in Australia. The initial encounters between the Eora and the British were a mix of curiosity, trade, and misunderstanding. But as the colony expanded, tensions flared. The British cleared land for farms, disrupting traditional hunting grounds and sacred sites. They introduced new diseases that had a devastating impact on the Aboriginal population, who had no immunity. For Pemulwuy and his people, the arrival of these strangers wasn't a peaceful settlement. It was an invasion that threatened their very way of life, a way of life that had existed for tens of thousands of years. The conflict didn't explode overnight. It began with smaller skirmishes, raids, and retaliations. But a key turning point came in 1790. Pemulwuy, seeking justice, or perhaps retribution, speared John McIntyre, Governor Arthur Phillip's own gamekeeper, who was widely distrusted by the Eora people. McIntyre later died from the wound. This act transformed Pemulwuy from a local warrior into the colony's most wanted man. Governor Phillip, enraged, ordered a punitive expedition to either capture or kill Pemulwuy and other warriors. This marked the official start of a brutal 12-year guerrilla war. Pemulwuy wasn't just a lone fighter. He was a brilliant strategist. He united different clans, something that was traditionally rare, forging a coalition of resistance fighters. He understood the landscape intimately, using the dense bushland of the Sydney Basin as his fortress. His warriors would launch lightning-fast raids on British settlements, farms, and military outposts, targeting food supplies and disrupting the colony's stability. They'd appear as if from nowhere, strike, and then vanish back into the bush, leaving the British soldiers, accustomed to open-field European warfare, completely bewildered and frustrated. One of the most famous episodes in this conflict is the Battle of Parramatta in 1797. Pemulwuy, leading a force of at least 100 warriors, marched on the government farm at Parramatta, a key agricultural hub for the struggling colony. They openly challenged the British soldiers and settlers. In the fierce fighting that followed, Pemulwuy was shot and severely wounded, receiving 7 pieces of buckshot. He was taken to the hospital, presumed to be dying. The British thought the resistance was finally over. But then, something extraordinary happened. Pemulwuy, defying all odds, not only survived, but escaped from the hospital, still in leg irons. To his people, this was a sign of immense spiritual power. A belief grew that he was a Carity, a clever man, or spiritual healer, and that British bullets could not kill him. This miraculous survival story supercharged his legend. It boosted the morale of his fighters and struck fear and awe into the hearts of the colonists, who began to see him as an almost supernatural figure. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol of unbreakable resistance. After his escape, Pemulwuy's raids became even more audacious. He and his warriors continued to harass the colony, targeting the Hawkesbury and Georges River regions, crucial lifelines for the British. For the colonists, life was filled with constant uncertainty and fear. They saw Pemulwuy as a ruthless savage, a terrorist. They didn't understand that, from his perspective, he was a patriot, a freedom fighter defending his land, his people, and his culture from foreign invaders. He was fighting a total war for the survival of his world. Among the warriors fighting alongside Pemulwuy was his young son Tedbury. From a very early age, Tedbury was immersed in this world of conflict, learning the tactics of guerrilla warfare from his father. He was a warrior in his own right, known for his skill and bravery. He wasn't just in his father's shadow. He was an active and respected participant in the resistance. He saw firsthand the cost of this war and the unwavering resolve of his people. The long war took its toll. In 1802, after 12 years of relentless fighting, Pemulwuy was finally cornered and killed. The circumstances of his death are murky, but it's believed he was shot by a British settler. Governor Philip King, who had a standing order for Pemulwuy's death, had his head severed from his body. In a grim act of the time, The governor preserved the head in spirits and sent it to England to the famed naturalist Sir Joseph Banks as a scientific curiosity. This desecration of his remains was the ultimate insult, a final attempt to strip him of his humanity and power. He been in death. To this day, the location of Pemulwuy's head remains a mystery, and efforts continue by Aboriginal communities to find and repatriate it, so he can finally be laid to rest with dignity on his own land. With Pemulwuy gone, the organized large-scale resistance he had masterminded began to crumble. But the spirit of defiance didn't die. It was carried on by his son, Tedbury. Stepping into his father's formidable shoes, Tedbury continued the fight. He led his own raids, employing the same hit-and-run tactics he had learned as a boy. He became a new nuisance for the colony, a constant reminder that the war wasn't truly over. However, the context had changed. The colony was stronger, more established, and the Aboriginal population had been weakened by years of conflict and disease. Tedbury's resistance, while fierce, was more sporadic and less of a strategic threat than his father's had been. He became known for his daring and sometimes theatrical acts of defiance. There are accounts of him raiding farms for food and supplies, but also of him engaging in negotiations and even moments of strange temporary truce with the settlers he fought against. Tedbury's story is complex. He was seen by some settlers as a troublemaker, but also, at times, as a figure of pity or even grudging respect. He was navigating a world that had been turned upside down. Unlike his father, who fought to expel the invaders, Tedbury fought for survival within a world now permanently occupied by them. His struggle was about securing a place for his people in this new hostile landscape. Tedbury's own war came to an end around 1810. Like his father, he was shot and killed. With his death, the first significant chapter of armed Aboriginal resistance in the Sydney region drew to a close. But their legacy is profound. Pemulwuy and Tedbury were not footnotes in history. They were the first leaders of a frontier war that would continue across the Australian continent for over a century. Their story forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths of Australia's past. It reveals a history of violent dispossession and heroic resistance. Pemulwuy is now rightly celebrated as a national hero, a symbol of Aboriginal courage, strength, and the enduring fight for land and justice. He and his son Tedbury were warriors who stood up against an empire, and their story is a crucial part of the shared history of all Australians. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more explorations into the hidden corners of history.